recording. Can I just welcome you one more time and have you
Yes.
repeat what you just said? That was so beautifully
Yeah,
stated.
so you have said my name correctly, Brandeis, and it's very much akin to how I introduce myself. So if you, those who don't know, a little history lesson, there's Louis D. Brandeis, the first Jewish Supreme Court Justice, as well as Thurgood Marshall, the first Black Supreme Court Justice. And so I am Brandeis Marshall, two Supreme Court justices wrapped up in a petite Black woman.
Beautifully stated. Oh my goodness, that was beautiful. So let's get started. I am so excited to have you here today. You offer such a unique perspective and unique and important perspective that we need today. Um, and your book, Data Conscious, we will be discussing it about the
Yeah.
algorithmic siege on our humanity. I have loved your perspective on that because it's very practical. First of all, it gives very real insights to people,
Yeah.
the average person who is grappling with these questions of the data that is going into the system and how they manifest in this
Yeah.
algorithmic outputs. Before we get started, start discussing your book, I'd like to introduce you to everyone, just a brief description, and we
Yeah, don't
will.
do the long one. Don't do the
No,
long version.
we would be here all day. So many amazing accomplishments. So we'll start with a short one. And please, everybody, the book links are in the chat. The volunteers are sharing. You have ways. We will not be taking questions. However, please follow Dr. Marshall on her LinkedIn page, on a book. Um, uh, Author page as well, and start engaging, and that's what we want to encourage. Please continue following their work. So Dr. Marshall is a founder and CEO of Data EDX Group, LLC. Data EDX provides learning and development training to help educators, scholars, practitioners, important group, in developing more responsible data AI practices. So you cover the gap between what is happening, the latest research, and what's happening in that space. And because of your background, you're able to then translate that into real, actual practices that is much needed. Dr. Marshall speaks, writes, consults on how to move slower, build better people first tech. She has been a Stanford PACS practitioner fellow, partner research fellow at the Siegel Family Endowment. And if you want to have her speak at your events, we have included the link in the chat. Please invite her to speak at your next conference or event. With that said, I have so many questions for you, but I will get started with. I would love to ask you one question to start off. Like, I try and ask this of all our authors. Like, what inspired you to write this book?
Oh my God. This might take me the whole hour, but I will not take the whole hour to answer this book. So, the book was because I was frustrated. And that's where a lot of my work comes from, is a point of frustration. Because all of my degrees are in computer science, I have a particular understanding of how a lot of systems work in the digital space. And so I noticed that there was a gap. I was trying to inform the students I was teaching about the importance of data, because I taught the intro to database course for too many years to count. And every time it's like, oh, this is a boring class. This doesn't, what do we care about this data? Why do we care about database management systems? It's so boring. It's so dry. And I was like, but this is leading to all of these transferable skills that you're going to need as computer science majors, computer science graduates, and how you're going to pivot, because you are going to move on to some other type of role very, very soon, because it's tech. Tech is going to change over. And lo and behold, AI came on the scene. Everybody's talking about predictive AI. And I was like, data is so important. Data is the currency that you need to understand. If you understand data, you will always have a job. Um, and so this book came about because I noticed there wasn't any textbook talking about this. There wasn't any platform that was speaking to what is going in these data systems, how the data was manipulated, how the data was then moved outside of these systems and then manipulated further. And I thought, I need to talk about the data pipeline, and I need to do it in a way that talks through the challenges and the pitfalls that I've seen just as an educator and as a scholar and researcher. What does that even look like? And because I was thinking about moving away from academia, I wanted to make it practical. I've always been the applied researcher. And I just really, really wanted to be actionable insights. Like, what could you actually do tomorrow, right? What could a junior or mid-level data worker, knowledge worker do to help their organization in their small conclave that they have dominion over? um, and that's what came about the book, is I needed to create the thing that I didn't see. And so I was pitched the idea to create a book with another publisher. I wrote a chapter or two. It didn't go anywhere. I was basically fired from writing the rest of the book with them. And then I navigated to another publisher who happened to say, yes, we want you to write this book, and we are all in. And that happened to be Wiley. And then I wrote the book, and I wrote the book in the midst of COVID. So it was a very interesting time to be writing a book about the topics that I was writing about, given all of the upheavals that were happening around the COVID era.
And we are so glad you wrote the book.
Yeah.
This should be a lesson to everybody watching right now and everyone who's out there trying to make this happen, that do not give up. If anything you want to take away and lessons from all these amazing women and scholars that we've been hearing from all day today, is that they don't give up. They have faced so many hardships. Our work is based on this, pretty much this core principle that we need to support these women in doing what they're doing, because the work you're doing is not easy, and you have faced so many challenges and pushbacks and hurdles, because people tend to see the highlight reel, right? They look at
Right.
you from outside and say, oh, that looks so amazing, I want to do it. And then they say,
Yeah.
oh, this is hard. And yeah,
Yes.
just a quick reminder that you make it look easy, but it ain't easy. And what you also bring is what Marhik so well said, that we need to be really looking to Black women to guide us. We had
Yeah.
yesterday, we had Dr. Danielle
Yeah.
Phillips Cunningham, historian, amazing
Yeah.
scholar and researcher and historian. Today we had Sophia Noble as well. And
Yeah.
there's so many incredible Black women doing amazing work in this space. And you
Yeah.
bring a very unique lens, right? Lived experience, historical references, your deep
Yeah.
expertise, and also your technical expertise. So
Yeah.
one thing I do want to ask you is, one, you mentioned code switching in
Yes.
your book. Can you help us understand for the audience that, like, what is code switching? How does it show up in these systems?
Yeah, so code switching, I think most people have heard the term code switching, is when a particular person, typically in a community of color, so typically Black or Latin person, they speak a certain way to people who are their same demographic background, which tends to be more relaxed, tend to be more familial. But then once someone that's outside of their ethnic group or their comfortability comes into the picture, then you actually become a little bit more proper. You remove the relaxed tone. You get much more straight and narrow. So that's code switching, just this as a conversation. And so inside of code, it does happen as well, right? So inside of how code is created, there are different programmers who are writing these algorithms and interpreting how those algorithms are going to execute. And so code switching within the algorithmic realm means that there are some biases that are embedded innate inside of these algorithms, that if someone's writing the code who happens to be of a historically excluded background, they might write the code a different way. And therefore, they may actually understand the biases a little bit better because it would have impacted them in real life. So then they decide to use a different type of algorithm in order to minimize that bias. Whereas someone else who does not have that marginalized background would not know and then just picks out of a list. So let me give an example. So one of the examples I did in the book was to talk through the shampoo algorithm. Now, the shampoo algorithm is how you wash your hair. And you see my hair, I have locks. So I wash my hair different than someone that maybe is Anglo-Saxon background. But in computer science, the shampoo algorithm is pretty much a quintessential algorithm that every student learning computer science has to write. But of course, that algorithm is written as though you were Anglo-Saxon. So you're in the shower and you're washing your hair. Okay, most Black people ain't washing their hair in the shower. We are washing it in the kitchen sink on a weekend, okay? And it's gonna take 4 hours, right? So that's number one. So it's not in the shower. So number two, there's a different levels of how you're washing your hair, right? So you wash your hair twice, you also condition it, you also do it. That's not necessarily the same type of algorithm as someone who happens to be Anglo-Saxon, who's washing it in the shower really quick, right? So this is just a very concrete idea of how code switching happens inside of algorithms, right? So if I am writing a shampoo algorithm, I'm writing it as though I'm washing my own hair. And what does that look like versus the shampoo algorithm of someone who has European descent and therefore washes their hair in a different manner, right? And then styling the hair is a whole different category, but we won't get into that. So hopefully that answers the question of what code switching is and what it looks like inside of code.
Thank you so much for making it so real and so vivid. This is one example we will never forget. It's going to stick in our head every time. It's a code switching. Love it.
Yes, everyone's gonna think about how do I wash my hair? Like I always try to say, like, how many Black people do you see at Supercuts?
Right?
None.
Fair, that's fair. Thank you. Thank you so much. Seeing all those laugh emojis coming out, like, thank you for making it so real for us, really. I
Welcome.
remember African-American vernacular. I read a research which showed
Mm,
that they were marked as slurs. Like
yeah.
that is like they were being flagged,
Yep.
right? So there again, how the dominant gaze, right, the European or the Anglo-Saxon gaze shows up in all of
Yep.
this, the dominant hierarchies show up in the algorithmic system, which is
Yep.
supposedly, and we know better, are supposed to be
Hmm.
neutral and objective. That isn't the case. So
Right.
I have a question about data and how are some ways that these hierarchies, like what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and what you can show up as, and we talked about an algorithm, what is the dominant approach. Can you talk about how data plays a role in enforcing those socioeconomic and racial hierarchies?
Yes. So I think what you started off with was, which was basically Ebonics being flagged. They put a fancy word on it. I just call it Ebonics. Being flagged is actually the best example. Inside of all types of text systems, right? So we are now in this generative AI era. And anytime you're starting to write an email or even a social media post, you are getting a generative AI bot that's telling you how to complete that particular phrase, that particular sentence, and trying to guess what your next word is. This is all based upon language that has been gathered and then tested against these AI models. Now, when it comes to Ebonics, it doesn't have Ebonics inside of it. So that means that if I'm trying to say gonna or fitna or tryna, right? I'm using language that is very much in my Midwest and Black culture, right? These systems aren't built with this understanding in mind. So natural language processing is therefore trying to match my vernacular to Anglo-Saxon vernacular. even when I'm trying to say something else, I'm trying to speak to my people in a certain way, right? Using y'all, for instance, which is more Southern than Black culture, but it does kind of blur lines there. Um, but in text, this is where you see it come up the most, right? This is where we see how someone using a particular word, therefore, is flagged as being incorrect, right? If I'm trying to say someone's being thirsty, they automatically think I'm talking about a drink. And I might not be talking about a drink. I might be talking about some person on a screen, right? Or there's also other vernacular that Black culture has introduced into our language, like a snack, right? So people think, oh, a snack is like a piece of food. No, it's not. No, it's not, y'all. It's not food. Right? But these are terms that get multiple meanings within Black culture that doesn't get transposed into these AI training models. So then there is conversation around, well, should there be African-American vernacular English put into these systems? I beg to say no, because there are certain parts about our humanity that don't need to be in digital systems. I'm completely fine with the snack being exposed as being a piece of fruit. If that's what it wants to be inside of Anglo-Saxon language, that's great. I think it needs to stay there. So then when I say to my friends, oh, that's a snack, then we can have a giggle and keep it moving, right? So I think that is the line that I try to highlight, and then try to provide some guardrails around, is like what should be digitized and what don't need to be. It's okay that things are outside the digital system. Not everything needs to be surveilled. Not everything needs to be put into zeros and ones.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's such a nuanced take that you're
Yeah,
offering. It
yeah,
isn't everything has to be encoded about a culture. It's not nothing has to be encoded. There's a line, there's a balance that we are
yeah,
striving for. And that's what you want to get to the sweet spot. There are some things about the culture should maybe never be digitized. And that's what makes
right.
us like human. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing
like
that.
we should be championing the contributions of women, right?
Mm.
Across all spectrums, right? There's buildings named after women, there's inventions after women. We need to have that history, that's accuracy, that is important,
Right.
but not every little detail needs to be in the digital sphere. It's okay that things are outside of it. It's okay that humans have to like make the decision and like weigh the options. It's okay for us to like use our brain. It's completely fine. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just love that you're saying that because it's important and it's important to contextualize it. What you're
Mhm.
offering is also context matters. Like you said,
Yes.
these words outside of the context lose their power, lose their meaning.
Yeah.
And that's where we keep getting into that trouble. And especially what you said about these words. Some words have made it to mainstream, right? There's so much
Yeah.
from that vernacular that has made it mainstream, like fam, right? Fam, everybody's
Yeah.
using that, and suddenly woke got
Yeah.
appropriated as something like again the cultural gets into this cultural wars piece of it. We could spend another day
Because in
talking about
another
this. I'll leave that aside for now, but there is an entire like seminar that could happen on how these words get appropriated,
yeah.
get into mainstream and so on. So but my
Yeah.
next question to you, and which you have alluded to in your book, is this what are the different ways that this language and the different ways, right, like Black people are kept out of these systems,
Yeah.
kept out of these spaces, especially in
Mhm.
computer science, data science, which you're trying very hard, like in a
Yeah.
very real, concrete way
Mhm.
to address. Can you talk to us about that?
Oh my God, how much time do we have again? How much? um, so I do a lot of work within broadening participation in computing and data sciences. And I just say data holistically now. I kind of remove the science because data touches every single industry. Um, so broadening that participation means there's awareness level. So do people even know that it exists? And then number two, there is this like level of retention. And that's the level that I work on, right? I really work on how do people stay in this discipline of computing and data, right? What does that even look like? Because, as I said, I spent my entire career in computer science. So I know the perils of being in computer science, and how difficult it is, writing the code, learning the different languages, literally trying to remember which language that I'm writing in, because I will not be able to remember, like, am I in Python? Am I in C++? Am I in C? Am I in JSON? Like, what is happening? Oh, I'm doing SQL right now, right? So all the different languages get stuck in my head, and they all get combobulated. But the ways that I try in order to provide this understanding that Black people show up, Black people are in and throughout the computing and data industries, is by who I reference in my book. I was very intentional about ensuring that every chapter had a list of references, because I am an educator, but also that those references were people of color, like not just Black people, but I'm talking about women, I'm talking about Latin, I'm talking about if I can find an indigenous person, if I can find Asian, South Asian, LGBTQ plus. It did not matter. I was trying to do my best to reference people who were not in the majority inside of computing and data. And that way that their work could be highlighted. So people will be like, oh, this woman did that, right? So the example I like using is algorithmic destruction. So algorithmic destruction, I talk about it, I believe it's in like chapter 10 or 10 or 10, 10, 9 or 10 in my book. And I talk through this notion of algorithmic destruction, and I set it up and I tell the story of what it is. And basically it is when an algorithm is like deleted, as well as all of the data assets affiliated with it. This is a tool that's been used by the Federal Trade Commission in a couple of landmark cases over the past few years, in order to make sure that these corporations are held more accountable for the harm that they cause by having algorithms that are very manipulative, right, and biased. And that means that the algorithm must go away, but so is all of the data assets associated with that algorithm. And the person who created the article that was the basis of this, her name is Tiffany Lee, L.I. She created that paper, right? So then I referenced her work directly, and I'm referencing her now, right? Because I think it's so important that we understand that in this broadening participation within the industry of computing and data, that we highlight who are the people who are doing the work, who are making the impactful changes that are practical and implementable, and understand that they're not all white men. In fact, most of them aren't white men, right? And I'm not just focused on Black women, I'm focused on everyone that's not a white man, or not an Asian or South Asian man, because that tends to be dominant as well within the industry. So I'm trying to do my best to broaden that, so everyone feels seen in a way that they hadn't felt seen before. Because I know I didn't feel seen when I'm looking for references to teach it when I was teaching classes.
That's what makes your work so powerful. It's grounded in reality. Yeah, and we so believe at Women in AI, please, we decenter technology as the focus. We look at who is contributing to the space, and this work was pretty much started when I noticed so many women, people of color contributing to the space, but just not even getting recognized for that. They kept getting drowned out by this narrative of this white male computer engineer as the be-all expert. And that shows up in so many of these algorithmic systems, because those biases are then amplified. And then speaking of biases, you have mentioned in your book the different types of biases. Can you walk us through, like, what is your perspective on, like, what are the different kind of biases? Because in just the average person's head, we keep hearing, like, in the media, there's a bias, there's a bias. But it's more nuanced, right? Than that.
Very nuanced. Again, a completely separate lecture that I could do, because there's over 400 different types of biases. Yes. 400. I said that right. You heard that right. There's like 400 different types of biases. And I believe it's catalog of bias, and catalog spelled the European way with the U. Catalogofbias.org is the reference. See, I can't help but be an educator. Um, but I essentially, in my book, break it down into two different categories of bias. One is statistical bias, and that's what we're very familiar with. There is some error inside of a mathematical formula, so an epsilon that you are now counting for. So for those movie buffs, it's kind of like Neo and Mr. Smith, right? And Agent Smith, right? Like which one is going to win, right? Um, that's one type of bias, statistical bias. The other type of main category is societal bias. And this is where there is the discrimination, the oppressiveness, the disparities, the inequities that are used as levers, right, in different capacities. So statistical bias, people are like, oh, it's p-value, or as I mentioned, in some type of epsilon, there's some error, right? There's a rounding error that happens. That's something that's easy to, quote, correct or fix. But then the second tier of bias, which I believe is the most predominant, is the societal biases. And this is when there is an algorithm that's used to represent people, and that representation of people reduces the person to a number and then ranks them. So that means that if you have a statistical error, and there is a use of that mathematical formula to represent people, you are now ranking people. So any type of precision error, any type of usage of that particular algorithm to decide things like rent prices, or where there's going to be the next Starbucks, or where there's going to be the next grocery store in the neighborhood, could directly impact the person and enhance those disparities. And those are social ills that can't be solved by an algorithm. This is where people have to come into play. So I create these two tiers, and within those tiers, there are 4 different types of biases that I talk through. On the statistical side, there's algorithmic as well as data biases. And again, those are the tinkering with a particular equation. And then on the societal side, there is the human and the business biases. And this is where we are struggling in order to really recognize and put front and center how our own experiences, our life experiences impact business, and that business impacts everything else, the algorithmic and the data biases that we see. And those are all reinforced. And that's what I talk about in chapter 3, which is the bias wheel. So they all reinforce each other. And that is where we have all the problems today.
I love that you're an educator because what I'm liking is how you make everything so relatable. I think we need more educators, right? It's just
Yeah.
building so people understand and they can relate to all of this and have very practical applications for
Yeah.
it's not some abstract because that's what's happening right now. It's
Yeah.
so much of the work we read about, and even in the news, like there's the hype, but even when there's real value and some real information out there,
Yeah.
people are not able to relate to it because it's not concrete. So I love that how you make it very specific, very concrete and
Yeah.
relatable for people. So
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thank
Um,
you.
Okay, and your book has provided many concrete examples of technological failures,
Mhm.
but I would love, and you've alluded to some of them
Yeah.
already, but can you give us some ideas as to how could this be have been prevented? Of course, you and I both agree that we need more representation, more
Yeah.
inclusion. We want technologies to represent and reflect the diversity that's, humanity presents.
Yeah.
Can you share some more examples, like how could have these
Yeah.
biases or these technological failures could have been prevented?
Yeah, I think in technology, there There's so many things that we do wrong in tech. As someone that's been in tech my whole entire career, I can talk about just ad nauseum and how much we do wrong. I think the first thing that we do wrong inside of tech is that we are so focused on optimizing the algorithm. And we don't remember that the algorithm isn't the end product. The end product is people. So one of the suggestions that I make in the book is we need to stop thinking about all of these tech companies as tech companies. We need to start thinking about them as research companies, and in particular as scientific research companies, which means they should abide by a human subject testing evaluation, which is called IRB, Institutional Review Board, that is very familiar within the academic world, especially if you're in the social sciences, which is essentially social sciences and physical sciences, which essentially is do no harm to humans or animals. Right. And you therefore, if you are creating a survey or trying to gather information from people or animals, you are therefore providing what your plan is and submitting it to a board of people to oversee it and approve it. And then you go through training as the researcher to make sure that you're not going to be coercive, you're not going to be harmful in what you're asking or what the end product would be. So this is the whole point of the IRB and the review. So this is one concrete example that I say that all tech companies should abide by at this point, because the optimization isn't the algorithm anymore. It is literally the people, because we are the data. They can't do anything with it. Like what happened this week? Stuff was released this week, and it's all about you submitting your data to a platform. We recently have had 23andMe is now being is declaring bankruptcy. What's going to happen to all their data? Those are data assets. That's assets of the company, but those assets are people's information. They're biological information. So I think we need to shift. So I think that's concretely one thing that I do say is that we need to just do a whole human subject testing review instead of trying to optimize for the algorithm. I think there's a number of other suggestions that I make, really based upon the AI hiring tool. And there's a number of different AI hiring tools that have been out there that have gone wayward because they have used the data of applicants that happen to be from a particular demographic. And therefore they're optimizing the candidate selection process to the demographic in which they hired, and it made sure that women and people of color can receive lower rankings. So that's definitely one of the running threads through the book of an example of where there has been tech failure. And so with that, I've suggested that there needs to be some real penalties associated with companies that do this malfeasance, right? That know that what they're doing is creating division and disparities and inequities, right? So the marker shouldn't be optimizing that algorithm. The marker should be, are you being equitable? And so yeah, I say revolutionary things like put them in tech jail, right? Like, a couple days a week, they just can't operate, right? I mean, because the criminal justice system, as I talk about very early on in my book, I think that's chapter 1, very much penalizes people of color, especially Black and Latin people. And it's devastating if you've ever engaged with the criminal justice system. It's devastating. Someone's put in jail, they might lose their job, they might have childcare, elder care challenges that then they're now in a system. So it's a very big deal. But companies don't have that same, what's the word that I want to say? The companies don't have that same issue. they don't get that same repercussion of that same cascading backlash. They get penalized, they get sanctioned, they get a little slap on the hand, and they go about their business, right? They still continue to run their business. What would happen if they get put on tech probation? Because people can be put on probation, and everybody wants a tech company to be a person now, according to the law. So why can't, by law, the tech company get put on probation? And then why can't the tech company then get put in tech jail?
No arguments
So,
here.
like, okay, so a platform won't work one day out of the week. They lose revenue. Just like a person who is incarcerated unfairly, right? Just like a person who has been tagged as being a suspect, they are then hauled away and they have to not be able to go to work, and they have to explain all the things to their boss, and hopefully their boss does not fire them. And it creates this effect for them. Why can't a company who wants to have personhood legal classification not have the same repercussions as a real human? Stuff like that.
100%. I honestly, no arguments here, 100% support everything you said. And I also want to point out something that it is exactly what you said, the consequences, right? The consequences for a human being are devastating, life-threatening, life-changing, total devastation. But then consequences of company and executives who make those decisions, then I think they go about their life after
Mm-hmm.
just destroying everybody, all of these lives, no accountability. And the accountability comes out first. And I'd say media is also complicit in this when they put out the headlines without any context. Oh, they got this fine and few million
Yeah.
dollars. And the public goes, oh my gosh, few million dollars. Few million dollars in fine for a company which has trillions of dollars in revenue is a drop in the bucket. It's a
Yeah.
rounding error for them. And I still
Yeah.
remember, and a little bit tangential to this is Rohit Chopra, who used to be FTC head, and
Mm-hmm.
he's predecessor to Lina Khan, and now he is now Consumer Financial Protection Bureau head,
Mm-hmm.
who said that what is the point even as a regulator when we take these companies to task when the amount that we can even penalize them is
Yeah.
so inadequate. So just
Yeah.
some context here that yes, we need to do more. The
Yeah.
consequences and the accountability and the penalty have to basically match
Yeah.
the action and the damage
Yeah.
that they're caused.
Yeah.
100% love it.
Yeah.
Going back to your book, there are some very important concepts that you've shared, new concepts that you've introduced. I have last two questions before we wrap up
Yeah.
this very insightful discussion, by the way. I love it. 360 degrees of panoramic view in coding. Never heard that before. You've introduced this. Can you help us understand what that means and what that looks like?
Yes. So, as I said, in the book, I just kind of throw all of my ideas in there to say we need to have a full understanding of the data pipeline. And that means that with every single place within the pipeline, there needs to be an ethics conversation. And we need to have this panoramic view. And we need to not put ethics at the end. We need to make sure that ethics review, ethics conversations are happening from the beginning, right? So as developers are coming to the table, as a data team or data person is in these conversations, as the product team is in a conversation, you need to have an ethics team to say, what are you doing and why? Like, that's the reason why in my book, I literally start out the chapters with a list of questions that you should ask, because it is like, why? Like, that's the first set of questions, why questions. Like, what are you doing? is a second set of questions. And how are you doing it is a third set of questions, because everyone asks in a tech conversation, they'll always ask how you're doing it. They never ask why. And the ethics team is there to ask why. And the fact that our computing and data education system doesn't start with the why is only perpetuating the problem. So it's not until people become practitioners in the discipline do they start going, well, yeah, why do we choose this particular algorithm over this algorithm? Or why do we use this library over this other library? Because no one has a conversation. And there's also this excitement over open source. And I have challenges with open source because I want to know, why are you using open source? Has open source been vetted? Has it gone through any type of ethical or responsible review? Is it really trustworthy? Is it even really good, right? Because it is created by a group of people who don't have your particular application in mind, right? So this panoramic view is to ask the why and the what before you do the how, right? Inside of the education system, especially collegiate and graduate school, it is all about like how you do it. Like, tell me how you got the statistical model. Tell me how that AI model is now going to be deployed. It's not giving you all of the steps beforehand. Why'd you choose one sort over a different sort? What's the issues with choosing one sort over a different sort? All those things.
Show
I
me
can
your
go on
work.
and on and on.
As an educator, show me the work. I would sit
Yes.
here all day with you, honestly listening. I'm sure
Yes.
our audience feels the same. I want to just, we are running behind a
Oh,
little bit,
no worries.
last minute, but I do want to talk to you about just one last thing. I
Yes.
would love to get your thoughts on how can we push back and retain our humanness, our identities in this AI age?
I will say quickly, what you do is that you disengage with AI. You don't have to do it cold turkey or 100%, but stop and think, do you really need it? And sometimes just don't use it, right? That's how you push back. You don't provide your free labor. You just decide, I'm not going to do it. Maybe it's one day a week. Maybe it's for 3 hours during the week, but you decide not to use it. That's how you push back. You ask questions. What's happening with my data? Where is my data? Right? This is how you push back. It is small conversations had regularly that puts pressure on companies to change their mode of operation. If enough of us, I'm a grassroots girl, if enough of us ask the question, companies have to respond. We've seen it work. It is not rocket science. It's literally individuals pushing back by asking questions and demanding, what are you doing with our data?
I honestly, I was just loving everything that you said. It's so powerful because one is critical thinking,
Yes.
because these tools are designed to like force us not to think, just unquestioningly. And I love as because you're a very core grassroots educator. They're like, show me your work, engage in critical thinking, engage in these tools more critically, and especially what you said, like this is a choice. We can make that choice. This notion that we have to just accept
Yeah.
everything that tech companies give us, that we have to use. Like we are, by the way, an AI free zone here. We don't allow note takers, and we are pushing back because we want this place to be a place of learning. You cannot outsource your brain power. You don't outsource that. Just engage with the
Yes.
author, engage with the human being who's put so much work, has so much talent, so much brilliance to offer you. So I'm so, again, such an honor to finally be able to host you. I've been thinking about for many years. I'm glad I finally did it, even though I was like, I don't know if you're gonna say yes, but I'm glad I tried it. So again, lesson to everybody. Yeah, even if you fear rejection, like just go for it. And
Yeah, why
this
not?
is such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mia. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for coming. This has been fantastic. I enjoy Mars and the end of Mars as well. So congratulations on just hosting this. This is absolutely beautiful and wonderful way to round out Women's History Month.
Thank you. Thank you again. Folks, we are on to our next session. Before we introduce our next speaker, do not miss it. We are going into the future with Cyborg. Again, another insightful conversation led by our co-chair, uh, Elena Kromova. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Lee, who is our Lee and Danita, who are going to be joining us for this brief session.